Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are broadcasting from the Thomas K. McKeon Center for Creativity, and I'm your host, Corey D. Taylor. My guest today is a domestic violence advocate. She's none other than Catherine Heimdale. If you want to know the true story behind domestic violence, well, you come to the right place. So stay tuned because this is Up Close with Corey Taylor. Hello and welcome back, and we're here with domestic advocate as well as author Catherine Heimdale. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Doing fabulous.
Man, well, I'm so glad you got an opportunity to get here. I think this is very interesting what we're going to be talking about today, because a lot of times when we talk about domestic violence, it's always tabooish and nobody really wants to talk about it. And the thing, my feeling is going to be after this show, people are going to start wanting to reach out to you and call and talk, because there are so many people that are in the middle of controlling relationships, as well as don't even realize they're in an abusive relationship.
Yes, that's
because
very
as
true.
as our guests are going to, our viewers are going to find out today, you probably didn't realize at first you were in a abusive relationship, because from what you shared with me prior to the show, you were abused as a child. So it's amazing that people don't even realize they're in an abusive relationship, and it takes something to turn the corner. So
does.
I have this question that I always ask my guests before we get into the heavy lifting. What have you been up to lately?
What have I been up to lately? I'm the business manager at RSU Public Television at Rogers State University in Claremore. I'm the president of Healthy Community Partnerships of Rogers County, and I'm on the board for the Rogers County Coalition. I'm very active with teens because I feel so strongly if you can help a teenager turn their life around, you've changed their entire life.
Wow.
So I'm very passionate about that, as well as domestic violence, which is my own personal soapbox.
Yeah, and you know, your book is called Escaping the Dragon's Path.
Yes.
Interesting title for a book, and we'll show it up here. But what gave you this title? What made you come to this title of this book?
Well, before I started working on the book, I did a lot of poetry. I started writing poetry. I used writing as therapy, so I used free-form poetry, and I wrote about everything, all the emotions, all the turmoil, all the fear, all the anguish, everything that I was dealing with from the time I was 17 years old up until the domestic violence in my life, and my own personal self-doubts, and the journey that I took to the point where I started writing. And I equated, in a few of the poems, I equated the abuser to a dragon. Dragons are beautiful. They're powerful. They have wings. They fly over trouble, because that's the way an abuser seems to be. They never get in trouble. And that's the feeling that you develop. And they will burn you to the ground.
And I think that's
So
a
that's
great
where that
analogy.
comes from.
And I wanted to stop you real quick, because I'm going to want you to repeat that again, because that's a great analogy. Because when I got a hold of your book, it said Escaping the Dragon's Path. When you explained that to me, and I wanted our viewers to hear it, you said that they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that gets me, because so many times when people are in committed relationships, the person that they meet, they may not know who the person really is, but
Yes.
they get enamored by, oh my God, he's so handsome, or she's so handsome. And I'm saying she because people
goes
don't
both
realize
ways.
that women can be abusive
Yes, they
towards
can.
men, as well as men be abusive towards women.
right.
But they are so, you said that because dragons are beautiful. And not only that, but you said that they can burn you. And so I think
Yes.
that's so amazing that you use those analogies. So take us back to,
Okay.
because you told me when you were younger, you suffered abuse, and there's a triumphant story with that, with the recovery from you being abused as a youth. But take us back to that time.
Okay. Well, when I was young, my mother was very hard on us. I mean, she was a wonderful mother in a million different ways. But when she got mad, she just beat us with the belt. I mean, she did. But as life moved forward, my mother went through a lot of therapy, And she reached the point where she actually apologized for what she did. And we came to such peace, and that was the first time I learned how to let go of something that, that tears you up so bad. So by the time I was 17, I had been through a period in elementary and junior high school where I was teased very harshly. And to people who, like my granddaughter asked me if I was teased when I was young. Yes. But the people that tease you when you're a child are not going to be the same people when they're grown up. And you're not going to be the same person. So what they're saying doesn't matter. But when I was 17, I had no self-confidence at all. I didn't feel like I was an attractive person or an interesting person. I hadn't dated. I didn't even try to be an interesting person that people would want to date because I saw no reason to. I was intelligent. I made good grades. So I was a professional bookworm and a professional wallflower. Back of the class, don't want to be noticed. That was it. I was a bookworm. And so that's where I was when I met my abuser. And
Wow. So I want to go back because if I'm not mistaken, because we've had prior conversations, was your mother subject to abuse as well when she was younger?
It passes on from generation to
And
generation.
that is my point, because people don't realize that it does pass from generation.
It does.
A little bit of what I went through was when I was a little kid growing up in St. Louis, my dad that raised me, he was a Vietnam vet. And we didn't find out till we were adults, he was very abusive. But we didn't find out that he was not only an alcoholic, which that was visible, but then we found out he was a heroin addict. Yeah. And we didn't find that out until we were like 30 something. And then everything clicked in and was like, oh, that's why dad was there. Yeah. So there's always some type of angst or reason why people are doing what they're doing in the realm of abuse. So for your mom was subject to abuse. Oh, yeah. So she just mimicked what she saw.
But in retrospect, knowing what my mother went through, I mean, Grandpa Gorky whipped them once a month for everything they got away with. If they left the yard without a dress on, they got in trouble. He was very strict, and he was rather abusive. So when I look at what my mother went through when my mother was bringing us up, she was 1,000 times better than he was. So,
but yet still abusive.
Yes.
Until she turned the corner.
Yes, until she turned the corner when I was about 12. I remember, because I remember the change. All of a sudden, she wasn't like that anymore. We got grounded.
Wow. So
it was a dramatic change.
But what made the change? What brought her into that change?
Therapy. Counseling. Wow. Counseling is awesome.
Wow. Okay. So now let's go back to where you were, because you said at 17, when I cut you off, you said, so I'm this bookworm. I don't feel like I'm attractive.
No,
I don't feel like I'm nobody. And I sit at the back of the class.
Yeah.
But then you say, that is the time where you met your abuser.
Yes, I did.
Okay, now take us to that time, because I want our viewers, and there's some young lady or some young man or somebody that knows someone in that position that may be feeling like you felt. They are feeling unattracted. They're feeling, unappreciated, not noticed. But then they'll get this person that is like this unbelievable person, like, you're paying attention to me.
That's right.
So take us there.
Okay. I walked into the youth house at church. It's where I met him. And my abuser was 17 years old. He was built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He really was. And he was very attractive. He was extremely popular. I mean, the boys in the group followed him around like groupies following a movie star. He was so popular. He had baseball scholarships. He was charismatic. And he was very controlling, and when he got angry, I remember when we were dating, he'd get mad over something completely pointless. Abusers do not get mad over big stuff. They get mad over stupid stuff. There's too much pepper in dinner, or, you looked like you weren't happy, or, it's always something stupid.
Wow.
And he would slam his fist into the windshield, but he wasn't going to do that to me.
Wow. And so you are this young lady, and the guy comes along, he talk about how
paying attention to me.
He's what we would call, young people call now, he was eye candy.
Yes.
And then he is paying attention to you. So what was going through your mind, if you can remember, when he started paying attention to you, how did that make you feel?
Oh, it was mind blowing. A guy was actually paying attention to me. I mean, it changed my whole perspective, but in retrospect, the more I got into the relationship with him, I changed the amount of makeup I used. I used more makeup because he wanted me to. I changed the way I dressed. I changed the jewelry that I wore. I changed everything because he changed me one step at a time. And, the first thing I want to tell people is if you don't believe in yourself, self-analysis is completely false. Don't listen to your own analysis of yourself. If you don't think that you're attractive or interesting, or you stand in front of the mirror, I'd stand in front of the mirror and tell myself I was an ugly person. Actually do that. Don't do that. Believe in yourself.
And when you say self-analysis, because you're saying that if your self-analysis is a negative view of yourself,
Yes.
and it's very critical, don't fall for that, because then you're setting yourself up for someone else to come in.
That's
and
right.
now they may not have your best interest at heart,
No.
like in the case of your abuser.
That's
and they
right.
may take advantage of that negativity, which in your case, Arnold Schwarzenegger has stepped on the scene. He's beautiful, he's eye candy, he's charming,
popular.
he's like the dragon.
Oh my gosh,
he's
yeah.
beautiful, and now he is paying attention to you.
It was the first time that had happened. And the one thing that I did develop in the time that I was in my relationship with him that ended up being one of my driving forces for getting out was I started to believe in myself.
Wow.
Because I found out that in the long run, it wasn't anybody else's opinion about me that mattered. It was, what was I doing for myself? What was I doing to help those around me? What was I doing to make a difference in the world?
Wow. And so I want to fast forward a little bit, because I think this is very noteworthy to talk about. Mm-hmm. You were in that abusive relationship how long?
I knew him for 2 years, and I was married to him for 4 years. So I was with him for 6 years.
And now I want you to share this with our viewers, mm-hmm. because when you were sharing this story with me, you said you had left him, 4 times?
I left him 5 times. 4 times I went back. It takes an abuse victim an average of 5 to 7 escape attempts to actually get away from an abuser.
That is so hard for me, and I know a little bit about this because I'm sharing with you my background, mm-hmm. about what my mom went through and we went through as mm-hmm. children. But when my mom made her escape, I've never talked to her and said, how many times did you plan to leave Dad or make that escape?
Yeah.
But all I know is that one time when she did decide to make an escape, good. He had work. Let's go. She packed up. She had it all planned,
yes.
and we were gone. And we
yes.
moved to a part of the city that he knew not where we stayed at. Mm-hmm. So in your mind, why does it take someone that many times to realize that I could die?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first 2 times I left him, I went to my mom's house because I wanted, you need help, you go straight to your family. Well, I would leave, I would tell my parents what happened, because the cycle of violence is very important to understand. You first meet them, you go through the honeymoon period and everything seems really cool, and then you reach a period of kind of static buildup. You can tell there's something going on and the tension is starting to build, and then something happens. And when something happens, they beat on you, they scream at you, they berate you, they abuse you emotionally, financially. It's not always physical. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but something happens. And right that minute, something is wrong. It's not right. It. You leave. So I'd leave, and of course he would call my mom and dad's house and talk to me on the phone, and he would cry, genuinely, plead and beg and swear on a stack of Bibles that he would never do it again. And you want to believe it, because you're hanging up on if only. If only he wouldn't do that. If only I wouldn't do this because it's my fault he gets mad. That's what you get trained. You're being brainwashed into thinking that when they get mad at you, it is your fault. It's because of what you are doing. They are not responsible for their own anger. So I would go back. And I did that twice. Once I went to my sister's house. That was the 3rd time. And he called and begged and pleaded, and I went back. The fourth time, I had divorce papers filed. I had an apartment. I was doing what I needed to be doing.
To get out.
Yes, but I had not learned how to be safe. If you are trying to escape from an abuser and you do not know how to be safe, you are not safe. You're not. So the fourth time I left, he showed up at the apartment and he told me that I was coming home. I had no power whatsoever.
And when he told you you were coming home, what was that response? How could he make you do it? It was just a verbal command?
And that's all it took, because I knew what he was capable of, and he scared the hell out of me. And I went back the fourth time because I had to, because I didn't have a choice.
And why did you say you didn't have a choice?
Because if I didn't say yes, he would just beat the living hell out of me. That's what he was doing.
He was just physically striking
Yes.
you and everything.
Yes, he beat on me when I was pregnant with my son John. My son John was 2.5 years old when I finally left, the fifth time I left him. By then, this is what makes me believe, based on what you said, that your mother had left many times before, because you learn. You have to learn how to be safe. You have to go where they cannot find you.
Yes.
So the fifth time I left, by the grace of the good Lord above, I knew about a small shelter. This was in 1982, when women's shelters and domestic violence was an under-the-rug issue.
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to deal with it. But the Baptist churches in Tulsa had a small women's shelter, so I went there. I had a truck to drive away with. I had no money. I had less than $1 in my pocket. I had no job. I had a 2.5-year-old son.
Wow. Now take us to the time, because you also shared this with me. You talked about how he was getting ready to really pound on you. Mm-hmm. And the deciding factor was your son.
Yes, it was.
Now, I don't want to start crying, because this is, but share that.
Okay.
So that the viewers can know, because it was not only your life in danger, but your 2-year-old
Yes.
son's life was in danger.
I was curled up in a fetal position in front of the couch, like right here, in a fetal position, and he was standing over me, and he was yelling and screaming at me, and he pulled his, I'll never forget it as long as I live, I can still see it like it was yesterday. He pulled his fist back like this, and he was getting ready to come down on me, and my 2.5-year-old son, John, came in and had his arms out and said, "Mommy, help you." Oh my God! I grabbed him and I pulled him into me as fast as I could and put myself between John and my husband, my abuser. And he freaked out. My abuser, he freaked out. He went into the bedroom and he shut the door. It took me 3 seconds to decide what to do. I knew what I had to do. I knew right then the key to getting out is always right there in your very own hand. It was my life, but my life meant nothing. My son's life meant everything to me. So I picked him up and I picked up my purse and I walked out to the car, and all the time going, "Please God, don't come out." Because if I knew it'd come out, if he came out, I'd never get away. I got in the car and I'm praying, "Please don't come out, please don't come out." And I was shaking so bad, and I put John in the seat next to me and backed out of the driveway and called the women's shelter. I got to the women's shelter and I had 4 weeks to hide. Abusers isolate you. They isolate you from your family. They isolate you from your friends, and they do it very good. They do it very manipulatively, because they make you feel like it's your idea, that they're the ones who are wrong. They're the ones that are at fault. So when I left him, my family had said, "Don't come back," literally quoting, "Don't come back until the divorce papers are in your hand." My whole family had turned away from me because they didn't know what to do. I'll tell you the number one thing: if you're a family member, never let go, never give up, never stop being there, no matter how hard it is and no matter how many times they leave. So I left and I went to the women's shelter. I was at the women's shelter for 2 weeks before I told anybody that I had left, and nobody knew I was gone. I could have been dead in a ditch for 2 weeks, and nobody would have known the difference.
Because it almost goes back to the boy that cried wolf. You've left so many times, and what your family failed to realize is you wanted to get out, but you didn't know how to execute that and stay safe. So people tend to give up because you don't want to do it, because if you really wanted to do it, you would do it. But there's always this defining moment in someone's life. Now, for those who are watching this episode, you've talked to them about that situation and about the abuser, but I want you now to bring us to the victory of life, because we know that you escaped and you got away, and that was in the 80s. But from what I understand now, you've been married for what, 33 years?
33 years.
33 years to a wonderful gentleman. So take us to that time. How did that happen?
Well, I met my wonderful husband, Greg. We met, I was living with my friend Debbie. My friend Debbie gave me a place to go when I left my abuser. I had nowhere to go, and she called and she said, I need a roommate. I said, Debbie, I don't have anything. She said, that's okay, come on over.
Wow.
She gave me a place to go, so I've always been so grateful for that. And she was dating Greg. Well, so I met Greg in August, and in September she started dating somebody else, just wasn't any big deal. So he called and asked me to go to a Crosby, Stills and Nash concert with him, and I thought, okay, sure, why not? We liked all the same stuff. We liked the same kind of music. We liked to go camping. The fact that I had a son wasn't something that was an issue for him. And so we just hit it off really well right from the beginning. So we met in August. We went on a date in September. We went steady in October. We got engaged in November, and we got married in January.
So what I'm hearing you say, that even though you went through all that abuse, you started changing yourself, and you said this earlier. You said within the situation, I started learning more about myself, and I started becoming self-empowered. But I still needed that little thing to help me get out. But then after you did get out of it, because you had started taking care of yourself and figuring out, how to change who you are, then you prepared yourself to be ready for the marriage that would last 33 years. And I think that is so awesome. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because there are so many women and men that are in your situation that have an abuser currently in their life right now. And they have not called it what it is. They haven't said it's abuse. They just keep on going, and they go on for 5 and 10 years. And then next thing you know, that, may hear about them on the news that they're badly hurt, or somebody's been killed or something like that. So tell me this. What are some of those signs, and we'll put something on the screen, what are some of those signs that our viewers can look at, the early signs of knowing if you're with an abuser?
Okay, one of the first things you want to look at is how they treat other people and how they treat animals. Because if they will be cruel to animals, or if they will beat on someone else, if they will do something belittling or cruel to someone else, don't ever think they won't do it to you.
Okay.
I remember one time when I was dating my abuser, and we were at the youth house at church where we met, and there was a lot of kids there, and he got mad at this one kid over some stupid pointless, because it's always pointless, put him in a headlock and slammed his head into the wall until there was a hole in the wall.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't get in any trouble. I mean, the cops should have been called. He should have been arrested, but he didn't get in any trouble. And I thought, yeah, but he's never going to do that to me. Don't ever think they won't do it to you. And it's not always physical. I met a woman at a speaking event once, and after I was done speaking, she said, it never occurred to me that all the yelling and screaming and name-calling and belittling, and especially doing it in front of someone else, cutting you down in front of others. She said, it never occurred to me that that was abuse. It's not always physical.
Wow.
But it's very powerful. And when you're in an abusive relationship, you're being brainwashed. You're brainwashed into thinking that everything is your own fault, not their fault. It's never their fault.
Wow.
They never take responsibility for their own actions, and that's another thing to watch
And
for.
there was a former recording artist. She had a movie after Straight Outta Compton came on, the movie about NWA, one of the almost billionaire producers. He used to be in a relationship with this woman that was a former R&B singer, and she talked about how when she started dating him, she could see the whole thing like you. He was great. He was a producer and he gave her music. But she started seeing the signs of abuse and he started abusing her. But then she went back to her parents, her grandmother, I think, and she said, whatever you're doing wrong, you need to fix it, because he's only doing this because you're doing something wrong. And she had internalized that
Yes.
so, just like you're saying.
Yes.
And so that's why so many women or men don't leave an abusive relationship, because they are always feeling like it's my fault. So I
Yeah.
need to fix whatever's
Yes.
wrong. And that's not really the truth at all.
No, and you also get hung up on if only. If only these things wouldn't happen, because when you're in the honeymoon period with them in the relationship, in the cycle of violence, they're wonderful. I mean, you're going for walks in the park, you're having dates, you're going out and having fun with your friends, and everything's cool. And then all of a sudden, one day you're at a party and he turns around and puts you in a corner and says something that worries you a little bit.
This book, Escaping the Dragon's Path.
Escape the Dragon's Path.
Escapes the Dragon's Path. In about 10 seconds, what would you say is going to be the best success for someone that's trying to remove themselves from this situation?
Number one, learn how to be safe. Reach out to your local domestic violence organizations. They all have hotlines. In Oklahoma, in general, you can go to the Oklahoma Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, I believe it is. Anyway, it's a statewide organization. Find your local organization. Get some information. Make a plan and follow your instincts. You have good instincts. Pay attention to your instincts. You know, he stormed out of the room and shut the door. I knew that was it. But, you know, like in your mother's instance, he's gone. He's at work. Let's pick up. We got to get out of here. You've got to know where you're going. You've got to go somewhere, and you've got to hide. Because if you go where they can find you, they'll talk you into coming back, because that's what they do.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for coming. Man, I hope our viewers pay attention and they have an opportunity to reach out to you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our show today. I would like to thank my guest, Catherine Heimdale, for joining us. Think about this. Change is inevitable, but your attitude towards that change, it is always optional. Until next time, keep looking forward.